Well, Arsenal don't do themselves any favours, really, do they? Every point has now become ultra important due to mainly the brilliance of Liverpool and the distance that they've created between themselves and the rest of the league. And it felt like after City were going to drop off, that Arsenal were placing themselves in the best position to take that crown off of City. Liverpool under Arne Slot have come out of nowhere to take that position out from under them, really. And it's sort of Arsenal's own fault in a way because I feel like through, I don't want to say poor recruitment because they've gotten from where they were when Mikel Arteta first got the job to, I think, what many people would class as the second best team in the league. So that is impressive and that is improvement. But you look at the squad and you still think there's just some serious areas lacking to take them to that next step. And when the total amount of money you've spent has risen to the levels that it has with Arsenal, it has to result in something fairly tangible at the top level. And I just still think that this team isn't capable of taking that step and grabbing the initiative and winning the league. They've allowed Liverpool to come and take the spot which they've been working towards. This game really epitomised where Arsenal have been struggling at points this season. 1-1 away at Brighton, which, looking up, and Brighton are a very good team, a very, very good team with a lot of qualities in their own. They've got a really good young up and coming manager, but Liverpool go and win this game, and it felt like in the end that Arsenal were just they're almost just ready to hold on to a point. They're almost happy with holding on to a point. And again, it's that lack of initiative, that lack of killer instinct that they don't have in this team to go and win games that is going to cost them. They're a hard team to break down. They're a hard team to beat defensively. They are really top draw. You could argue the best team in the league on that front. But you've got to have the best of both worlds when you go into win a Premier League, and that's why Liverpool are in a better position. They're as fantastic defensively as they are attacking. They're not compromising one to benefit the other. And I'm going to demonstrate that more now when I go and talk about Brighton's on the ball phase. So Brighton would build up in sort of a 2-4-1-3, I guess, with O'Reilly as the pivot, the attacking pivot rather, in between the front line and the deeper midfield too. Ayari and Baleba as the double pivots looking to collect from deep. Igor and Van Hecker spread really wide, making it a back three with Verbruggen playing a vital part. Estupinian and Joel Veltman moving forward and getting progressively higher and higher up the pitch as the attack would go on. But they try and make that pitch as big as possible. And with the 11 they have on the pitch all being vital components of that build-up, it was a great deal of composure on the pitch, a great deal of technical quality that they could use to hold on to possession that made it harder for Arsenal, who would press high, as they normally would. It would be with Jesus starting on Van Hecke, you'd get Moreno and Declan Rice pressing onto Ayari and Baleba in these deeper positions, Trossard starting on Veltman, Ranieri on Estupinian, Jorginho on O'Reilly, and Saliba and Gabriel initially managing João Pedro, with Partey on Adingra and Calafiori coming in to Gruder. Adingra would hold the width on the left-hand side, as would Gruder on the right-hand side, but that would change and that would alternate as the play went on. And the initial move for Brighton in this build-up phase would be Gabby Jesus would come inside from Van Hecker to Verbruggen to try and close him down and win the ball back as quick as possible. Verbruggen's a very composed goalkeeper on the ball with his quality and a very technically comfortable one, but he wouldn't have access to the pass to Van Hecker, who is a very good a passer of the ball from deep, so the ball would naturally go to Igor. You get Declan Rice then jumping up onto Igor from his marker Ayari. Jorginho would then come up from the deeper area onto Ayari. You'd get then maybe Gabriel engaging from the defensive line to come onto O'Reilly to prevent that from becoming an opening and an issue, so Arsenal would then go fully man-to-man in these areas. The issue is with how big the Brighton make this pitch, is they leave a lot of space for players to move into, and it's a lot of effort when players need to jump to press to cover that ground. So Igor could get a couple touches on the ball in this area to play the ball forward, play it around the outside, maybe to Estupinian, play it long even to the front line before Rice could get there, as good as Rice is on the press. And because of the split nature of Igor and Van Hecker, Ayari could drop in and at points making it a bit of a back three and receive the ball from these deeper areas. Maybe Jorginho not as comfortable coming into this area. Maybe Moreno would react a bit too late, so then that ball could come into Baleba. Maybe Jorginho not coming up quick enough from O'Reilly. So those little jumps and the amount of space they have to move is hard for that Arsenal midfield, especially Jorginho coming from deep, who's not the most mobile, and Brighton just creating as much space to exert as much energy out of Arsenal as possible, I think was definitely key to the plan, and it enabled them to get up the pitch a lot easier. Arsenal didn't turn the ball over as much as they've been known to do with how good their press is, and their press definitely got worse as the half went on and as the game went on, and they ended up sitting back a lot easier, especially in the second half where they resorted to sitting very deep and allowing a lot of sustained pressure. Another way they could progress as well is if Jorginho doesn't quite engage in this area, maybe Marino gets caught coming from Baleba to Ayari in this position. Trossard can come inside and try and close the man down. Maybe Gabby Jesus can move back, but again, that then leaves a pass for Ayari to play it to Van Hecke, who could then play it to Joel Veltman, who can drive up with the ball. Gruder coming inside as well to allow that width to be attacked by Joel Veltman, meaning Calafiori has a decision to make. Does he come inside to Mark Gruder? Does he stay out wide and hope that Trossard can get back quick enough to cover that space? Or maybe Trossard can track Veltman, allowing Calafiori to manage the two well enough. So, again, there were options for Brighton. They could use the size of that pitch to their advantage. And the only real issue they had from this side was that because of the play being built up on the left-hand side, when Joel Veltman would have the space to attack on the right-hand side, he doesn't have the athleticism, the pace, and the just general attacking quality to make the most out of these positions. And with Adingra being the only real transitional threat on the pitch, and he was so far off to the left-hand side, there was no real easy pass to hit as Gruder would come inside a bit too easily. João Pedro would look to use his body to almost receive the ball with his back to goal and look to play that way. In the second half, they changed that, but first half, they really liked the transitional threats. So sometimes Brighton's attacking momentum would be halted just by that lack of balance within the attacking play. But when they did push Arsenal back, this was the shape. So when Brighton pushed forward, they were in a 3-1-6 shape with Estupiñán initially in the first half tucking in to perform the role of a left centre-back. Baleba as the pivot. You get Veltman moving up on the right-hand side with Gruder pushing inside into the right half space. These two could interchange and Veltman could take the position inside and Gruder out wide. But typically I'd say it was Veltman holding the width. O'Reilly is the attacking central player. Ayari coming into the left half space with Adingra providing the width out left. João Pedro is the striker, and Arsenal would drop into their 4-4-2. Very deep, very compact. They managed that space well vertically between attack and defence. Declan Rice was pressing alongside Jesus to try and manage the passing rotations between Baleba and the two centre-backs. As Nwaneri would come from his right wing position to press Estupiñán to prevent him from getting any real comfortable amounts of possession on the ball. So it allowed that maybe Rice could sit on Baleba while Jesus comes to Igor, or the other way around, maybe Jesus drops in and Rice can press. And when this would happen, you'd sometimes get Adingra showing in a little bit deeper. Partey would make sure to track him in this area. You'd get Ayari being tracked by Jorginho, O'Reilly by Moreno, and you'd get Trossard and Calafiori performing dual roles. You'd sometimes get Trossard tucking in centrally to mark the easy pass into Gruder and Calafiori staying out wide, or Calafiori could press in and you get Trossard dropping into a bit of like a left wing back position. Again, very comfortable understanding between those two on the defensive side of things on that left-hand side. Also, the positioning of Ayari and O'Reilly could create some issues for Arsenal. So let's say if they split themselves a little bit too wide, creating space between Jorginho and Moreno, you'd get João Pedro offering for the ball from deep, dropping in a little bit more to use his back-to-goal play to link up and overload that central area. He'd be engaged by either Gabriel or Saliba, depending on who was closest to him. So in the second half, Ruta and Minter came on for O'Reilly and Gruder, as I was just saying. Estupiñán pushed forward into the left half space attacking from deeper areas. Igor would shift across with Van Hecke, who was in the centre of the defence, which is a lot more comfortable position for him to be in. Veltman could drop in, and Minter provided the width on the right-hand side, and it just offered a lot more balanced quality. It felt like players were in their more natural positions. Ayari was in the centre of the pitch. You could also have Ruta interchangeable with Pedro, allowing Pedro to drop in a little bit deeper as Ruta occupied the defensive zone of that pitch for Arsenal. And it was just a little more well-rounded with its quality. You still sometimes get those deeper runs from Joel Veltman to try and attack the space between Calafiori and Gabriel, maybe run off the back of Trossard, who wouldn't track his run well enough. And in the second half, I thought, look, the team most likely to win it. They dominated these areas. Arsenal's legs had gone. They were happy just sitting deep and soaking up pressure, and I just thought it was almost too comfortable and unnecessarily comfortable game from Arsenal. They struggled with Brighton making the pitch as big as they possibly could, and it was only until the second half when they brought Martinelli on that they actually had a transitional threat from these deeper areas, as Nwaneri and Trossard just aren't that. Just too safe. I didn't get it. I didn't get the safeness. Safeness isn't really a word, but or I don't think it is anyway, but you know what I mean. So as a result, Brighton got a well-deserved point. Again, on another day, they could go on and win the game. How did Arsenal attack the game, though? Well, that's an interesting one. Arsenal built up in a strange shape. It was a weird sort of 2-3-2-3. It would be Jorginho sitting in between the two fullbacks, which created a bit of a weird isometric shape because Calafiori would push a lot more forward than Partey would. Partey would almost drop in alongside the defensive line, whereas Calafiori would move forward, maybe allowing Moreno to drop into his position, and he would operate high up in the left half space. There was a lot of interchanging between those two. You'd get Jorginho as the single pivot, as I just said. Sometimes you'd get Moreno playing the double pivot as well. Again, you had a lot of rotations and flexibility within this system. Rice in the right half space, Jesus up top with Wanyeri and Trossard out wide. And the positioning of Moreno and Rice initially was very strange because they almost took positions in line with the fullbacks. They were very, very wide and created a lot of space between themselves and Jorginho. And strange from Brighton, who would look to press zonally. They'd press high and they'd press zonally. I think fully aware of Arsenal's transitions and the way they rotate their shape, and they have players very flexible and comfortable moving into different positions. So they were purposefully very adaptable. And Carlos Baleba was I'd say, the most important cog of this entire system from a Brighton perspective. And I'll demonstrate that as we move it further on. So when Raya would look to play the ball, you get João Pedro ready to press from deep. And let's just say if the ball went to Gabriel, you get João Pedro pressing onto the player on the ball. You get Ayari and O'Reilly ready to press. So if the ball went to Gabriel, Ayari would press Saliba. If the ball went to Saliba and João Pedro was close to Saliba, you then get O'Reilly coming across to Gabriel with Ayari sitting on Jorginho. You'd also get the markers trying to push him out wide on the side they were on. So let's just say if Saliba was on the ball here, you'd get him playing it out to Partey on this side. Adingra would take a deeper starting position from Rice to then jump onto Partey. You then get Gruder maybe coming into Moreno. Let's just say if he'd came in a bit more narrow here to try and just force Arsenal over to that one side where they would congest them. And you may look at this and say that, well, this leaves the pass into Rice free. This is where Baleba would come in the most use of all in this entire pressing stage for Brighton and Hove Albion, is he would sit deeper. He'd almost take a position in the defensive line at points to then engage with the wide midfielder on the side that Arsenal were looking to build up and prevent him from becoming free, prevent him from becoming the target that they could play an easy ball to, and he could turn and then play forward and try and exploit that Brighton back line. Did it fantastically. And let's just say if the ball went back to Raya and they tried to recycle it into the other side, you'd get him quickly moving across into this area. So you'd get Moreno pulling out a little bit wider, Jorginho coming into this area, Baleba moving back into a more central position. Adingra would come into Rice now, as Arsenal would look to play over into this side to get Calafiori on the ball. Who would then obviously look forward to try and play the ball to Moreno on this side, where Baleba would have to get back into position to be ready to spring again. And his energy levels were fantastic, his defensive discipline, his reading of situations, his positioning was all top draw from Baleba. And he's grown into a player this season. Fantastic levels of energy. He's really filled that Caicedo mould that was left, and he's so important. He was so integral to how Brighton prevented Arsenal from playing. Also, in the times that Arsenal went into a double pivot with Moreno in these areas, then that would be his cue to come and press alongside either Ayari or O'Reilly, depending on who was in the deeper position, and make it a bit more of a 4-4-2. Again, he's reacting to the player that's free. And Brighton even had a way to deal with that if Declan Rice became free, because Adingra would move on to Partey. It would either be him ready to jump back onto Rice or him ready to jump onto Partey, depending on which man was the danger man at that time. He'd always be ready to manage it in between the two. And if he fully committed to Partey, then Igor would come up from this area to press Declan Rice and prevent him from getting on the ball. So they had a backup plan for when Baleba got pulled into these central positions because of Moreno's positioning. And again, it became fully man-to-man at that point. Van Hecker would mark Jesus, and it was comfortable. So as much as Arsenal have all their contingency plans for certain ways that opponents press, it felt like Brighton were with the equal measure. They always had their own response to how Arsenal were going to try and play out. And the biggest issue, above all, forgetting about shapes, forgetting about players in certain positions that can help progress the ball up the pitch, the personnel that Arsenal went with in this midfield, baffling. And now it's important to say that when Odegaard came on, it didn't get any better. In fact, I thought their on-the-ball quality got worse. So it's all well and good saying that this missed an Odegaard when he came on, and I thought he was just equally as poor. But Jorginho, Moreno and Declan Rice were really, really safe with their passing. They don't release the ball quick enough. When Arsenal were pushed over to one side and they had to play out to the other side, it was very slow in possession. And so Brighton could adjust and adapt and move back into position quickly. And they just really struggled to play any real incisive passes forward. The only time that really felt like they were making efforts to play into Gabby Jesus' feet was if he was showing for the ball himself. So let's just say if Adingra is getting pulled back onto Rice, Jesus could drop in a little bit more, and that would allow Van Hecke to come up and mark him. Van Hecke dealt with these situations really well, contested Jesus physically, and Jesus, again, was just forced into situations where he'd have to go backwards. And where this did create space for Arsenal is with Van Hecke and Igor ready to engage from these areas. It meant that the fullbacks had to narrow up, and then this would create space for Arsenal to play the ball into the wide area. So let's just say if Declan Rice or Partey got the ball outside, they could play it to Wanyeri or Calafiori and Moreno on the side. They can play it to Trossard, who would have a little bit more space in the wide areas. Again, this is an issue. Trossard and Wanyeri are not great one-on-one players. This is where you need that transitional threat. This is where you need that fast-paced attacking quality to exploit the space, attack the man one-on-one. Joel Veltman should be there for the take, and he's a player in his 30s. He's defensively solid, but he lacks that spring against a player with lightning acceleration. And again, a bit like how I was criticising the midfield and Odegaard came in and didn't really fix it, Martinelli came on, and Arsenal still lacked a bit of quality in those attacking situations. And again, it just felt easy for Brighton to manage. They could play high. There wasn't a transitional threat and squeeze Arsenal up the pitch. And they didn't have to worry about the threat on the break, and they didn't have to worry about the technical quality in midfield opening them up. And they did concede a goal from the high line because of Wanyeri getting through, but it was less through his one-on-one dribbling abilities. More Moreno coming over, overloading this area, Baleba coming across, Estupiñán getting pulled in a little bit too high, and neither of the players really managing their man well enough. Moreno was able to run off the back of Baleba. It's the one bit that Baleba really failed in. Estupiñán and Adingra getting caught way too high up the pitch, and the pass gets played into Wanyeri. Van Hecke doesn't cover across well enough in this area, but Bruggen should save it. It goes through him a little bit too easily. So just a couple little individual mistakes that happen, and Arsenal get their goal. But apart from that, didn't threaten a whole lot because they didn't have the personnel to. They didn't have a way to get in behind and exploit what it can be a bit of frailties from this Brighton defence, from this Brighton team. As I said before, they're a very good side with a very good young manager, but they have their weaknesses, and Arsenal just didn't have anything to hurt them. And that is down on the squad building that has resulted in seeing this good team, but a very safe team. Just a very, I don't want to use the word boring, but just safe, just boring, just comfortable, just it does what it says on the tin. And again, Saka being out is harmful to Arsenal this season, but it's something they're going to have to adapt to because he's going to be out for a couple of months. And I can't really see many more games where Odegaard doesn't start because you need as much creativity on this pitch as possible. And even as poor as Martinelli has been, I just think having that transitional threat is key. Even if he does waste the ball, he at least gets you up the field. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you disliked it, comment down below and tell me why either way, and subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.